Perfecto. Buenos días.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming to this panel. We are doing it the day before the International Women's Day tomorrow, so I think it's a wonderful opportunity to bring in people from the bank and from outside the bank to talk about a subject that undoubtedly is passionate. And what we're going to use today is that we have to normalize a conversation. We have to talk about something that is often a cult, and we have to make it visible. My name is Dicha. I'm head of the Discovery Unit from Bit Lab, and I'm here with Miriam De Paoli, Andrea Monge, Victoria Simmons from Leadership and Employee Development and Human Resources in the bank, and Andrea Monge from the Gender and Diversity Division in the bank. I think that we have a really excellent panel to share this topic with. For me, it's very important because it comes from what we all talk about, which is intersectionality between gender and the silver economy. And I think that that brings up interesting conversations which open our eyes to see people and realities from a point of view we didn't have before. Clearly, that is what this panel is going to do, to see things we didn't see before and see people, our colleagues, our female and male colleagues as well, differently. An interesting thing here is when I speak of normalizing, is I chair many panels, but seldom as in this, before the panel, had I received in the social media so many comments of what are you doing there, what are you going to talk about, what's all this about, who tricked you into this? And I think that that's the role that we have to play precisely in this conversation, to be part of a dialogue which is becoming more and more important, because it is a reality which is more and more present in organizations and amongst the colleagues who are here in the organization. So I think that this discovery journey is to discover the other person, the other colleague. And in this journey, in this discovery journey, what we're going to find today is key things. Miriam, I think the floor is now yours. Thank you very much. And I'm Miriam De Paoli. I believe that we have a video before we start with my presentation, but I'd like to thank all of you for being here, who are from your home or present. We have a lovely amount of people here, wonderful people who are here with us to talk about how can we be more inclusive with the female talent 40+.
En BitLab estamos de aniversario. Este año, en el Laboratorio de Innovación del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, cumplimos 30 años, dedicados a impulsar la innovación para la inclusión en América Latina y el Caribe. Espera, ¿innovación para qué? En BitLab innovamos para mejorar vidas. Somos la principal fuente de financiamiento y conocimiento para el desarrollo enfocado en América Latina y el Caribe. Trabajamos con diversos actores del ecosistema de innovación para impulsar proyectos y emprendimientos en etapa temprana que tengan el potencial de generar impacto a gran escala. Han pasado 30 años desde que comenzamos, pero nuestra esencia es la misma. Dinamizar sectores cruciales para poblaciones en situación vulnerable por condiciones económicas, sociales o ambientales. Impulsamos la adquisición de habilidades y también energías limpias y servicios que mejoren la productividad de nuestra región. Hoy contamos con tecnologías y modelos de negocio avanzados para transformar sectores como la salud, la educación, la agricultura y las finanzas, haciéndolos más accesibles, asequibles, inclusivos y respetuosos con el medio ambiente. En BitLab llevamos 30 años movilizando financiamiento, conocimiento y conexiones para América Latina y el Caribe. 30 años de innovación para la inclusión.
Bien. Ahora nos toca a nosotros
Now it's our turn
hablar de algo que
to
muchas
talk about something that
muchas veces no, yo creo que para la
often,
mayoría
I would say that
ni llega a ser un
most of the times it's not even a subject you bring
toda
up, but
persona que nació
all
reproductor
who was
femenino,
born with a female reproductive
o sea, la menopausia por más
apparatus
que hablemos,
menstruated. But menopause, we talk about it or not, happens, and today it is visible.
Y ya vamos a ver por qué. Por ejemplo,
And we'll see why in a minute. If the IDB lab had been born as a woman
un varón trans hubiera nacido con
or
aparato reproductor
with the reproductive
muchos años fértiles, pero muy
device, it would be in her fertile
de
life, but close to
caída de su fertilidad.
the
Que a los
drop of
35 años
fertility, because at 35,
se llama la
women goes into what's known as
Nadie
premenopause.
habla de eso.
No one talks about that. And medicine itself gives us the name.
¿Quién soy yo? Bueno, yo soy
Who am I?
Pauli.
I am Miriam De Pauli. Those of you can Google me if you want.
Milagros
And with Milagres Kirpatch, we formed No Pausa, which is a Latin American organization dedicated to promote what's happening here precisely, that we talk, that we make this visible, that we find solutions for the climacteric and menopause. There are more than 170,000 women in Latin America now. So what we're going to talk about obviously has a lot to do with me and my story, but also I'm like the avatar, the voice of those 170,000. What are we doing, No Pausa? 5 very, very brief things. First, we are a multi-platform information network. You Google us and can find us in LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you look for us, we're there, sharing information. We are a community of more than 170,000 persons in the networks to share information amongst peers and physicians and interested parties, inclusion leaders. In other words, a whole ecosystem that works to make this subject visible. We work as a data observatory, and this is the most important thing. We're talking about a third of the life of women, and I'm going to use the word women, although there are some trans men who go into menopause as well, just to make it easier for me to talk about, but we are inclusive. There's no data. There's no data in Latin America. We don't know how we stop menstruating. We don't know how much it costs to stop menstruating. And we're going to explain why. It's not that we're bad or that we simply forget these women. It's just that history made it such that it's only now that we're beginning to have a voice. We also develop programs, training, and educational materials. And we consult with all 3 sectors, because here we have to have a dialogue amongst all of us, civil society, enterprises, and women. This is us. 1 billion women. Currently, there are more than 1 billion women that are going through the menopause. We think that the figure would be reached by 2025, and it was actually reached in 2022. And here's where the intersectionality is key. All those women in Latin America, 37 million, is going to go through that stage in a unique way. Many things in common, yes, but many things different. And what does it involve? The couple, the family, the colleagues. Why? Because when we're going through that stage, all of us are leaders in our work, in our families, in our communities. We exercise that leadership. We have the care economy often. I'm sorry, but her microphone is turning off at the last part of her sentence. And here we're talking about something which goes beyond gender. It's life, because a person who's going through the menopause or climacteric has contacts, labor contacts, social contacts, and that stage arrives with no information. And if that's the case, it's going to have a negative impact on her life. And here I want to clarify something very important. The climacteric or menopause is not a liability for our gender. It's not a problem. You know what the problem is? It's the misinformation. The climacteric or menopause today is different from when our grandmothers had their period, when the grandmother used to say, oh, the first time I got my period, I thought I'd die. Today, 70% of us have gone through that stage without enough information, so that it won't have an impact in our lives. And we're not talking about women in vulnerable situations. I'm going to ask you a question just for 2 seconds. What do you think of when you hear the word menopause? Don't be ashamed. Come on, tell me, menopause. What comes to your mind?
Bochornos. ¿Qué más?
Problems. What else?
Calores.
Heat, the hot flashes. Anything else?
Envejecimiento.
Aging. Yes.
Nosotros salimos a
Well,
preguntar
we went out to ask
a Google.
Google,
Google
and obviously Google right now
lo que nos
is what shows us what we think of as a society, because it's an algorithm. When we ask Google,
¿Qué es una mujer menopáusica?
What is a menopausic woman? Look what Google shows us.
Dolientes,
Pain,
dobladas.
people doubling over, and when we see them smiling, these are postmenopause women.
Nosotros
In other words,
no sabemos
we don't
educar el algoritmo.
even know how to educate the algorithm. And that impression, what do you think? Is it in line with reality?
Eso es la parte más
That's
interesante
the
del
most
trabajo
interesting
menopáusico.
part of the no pausa work. Today,
Prometí que no me iba a levantar, pero
I agreed
puedo con mi alma.
not to get up, but I can't help it. I have to get up.
Ustedes ven
Here you see
que tienen algo muy
the Hollywood actresses who have something very important. That's why I'm
acá
pointing
tenemos a
to it.
bellísima Jennifer
Here we have
Aniston, Gwyneth
beautiful Jennifer Aniston with Paul Stroh
Kate.
and Kate Hudson.
Ellas invirtieron en
They
una startup de
invested in a
menopausia que se llama
menopause startup, which is called Evernorm,
que trabaja con reposición
that works
hormonal, con
with hormone reposition with Drew Barrymore.
creo que Jennifer Aniston no
I think Jennifer Aniston didn't invest. But in the other picture, we see the women who look like perimenopause.
bellísimas,
These are beautiful, lovely, happy women, but they're all postmenopausal women. The world believes that we
somos esas.
are these women, the ones that go out and talk about it are them, and we're here in the middle.
Necesitamos empezar a
We need to begin to understand
necesita esa
what
mujer promedio.
does that woman think of? What does she need, that average woman?
¿Qué es entonces la menopausia
What
del
is
siglo XXI?
the menopause of the 21st century? We're talking about a menopause
Que tiene
that has
caras
so many faces
como personas que la están atravesando.
as people
Lo mismo
feeling
una
it.
mujer que atraviesa
It's not the same when they go through the climacteric in a urban area or in an urban or rural area or in a developed country or in a developing country. It's not the same. But there are many similarities, much more than we can imagine.
y hay un porqué.
And there's a reason why we don't talk about this, because 70 years ago,
57
we lived 57 years.
teníamos el
No, I'm sorry.
menopausia
We had
57 años.
our menopause 57 at the age of 57, and we died at 59.
Esa idea de que
That's why this idea implies that menopause is related to
en
senectude.
ese momento,
Senectude.
¿cuál era el rol de la mujer?
And at the time, what was the woman's role in society? To reproduce. That's it. In this patriarchal society, as soon as we're no longer fertile, we would lose our productive role. So we put our robe and we just waited to see what would happen. But if you go into Google, they still have that image of the woman looking towards the horizon, waiting for, I don't know what, maybe the child that didn't come. But what changed? Today, the average of menopause is 51, and we're going to live up to 78 to 83 years. What does that mean? That a third of our life is still ahead of us. A third of our life is still unlived of. We know nothing about how we get into that productive longevity. That's probably the most important thing. And why do we have to talk about climacteric and menopause? Because we're talking about health and diversity and inclusion. And more importantly, we're talking about a new role of people who menstruate in society and when they stop menstruating. There's something that we often talk about, which is the hormonal biography. We know very little about this. We know that we have puberty and the fertile years, but no one talks about the climacteric. And why is it important to talk about the climacteric? Because it is a stage. And that's why we're here at the IDB Discovery talking about this, because menopause, it's useless to talk about it because it's a single day of our lives. The menarche, the first day of blood, and menopause, the last day of blood. And the little cup but how do we know what the day of our menopause was? Because it's 12 months without menstruating to know that we had menopause. For example, my menopause day was in March, 31st of March of 2022. That means my last period on March 31st of 2021. I'm a woman that is entering in the first years of my postmenopause years. I'm still in this period. So why do we have to talk about the climacteric? Why is it important? Because 80% of us is going to have some type of symptom during that stage. 20% are fortunate who go through all that stage without having any symptoms, but very few. And there are exceptions. Most women will have some type of symptom. So what's the problem of having symptoms? If you're well informed and you know that what's happening to you is because of a natural drop in the system and not what happened to me and to most of the women in the world, especially in Latin America, we had very long periods of visiting doctor after doctor until we got a very simple diagnosis of perimenopause. I spent a year and a half until they realized that everything that was happening to me was not neurological, because I thought I had dementia, and I'll explain it. It's a pretty cute anecdote. But now it's funny, but it wasn't at the time. Now looking back, at the time it was terrible. Women who think that they have problems with their brain because they have migraines, and doctors and society don't make that relationship between 43 and 45 years of age. It could be the drop in hormones. Maybe you're going through a new stage in your life, a stage like any other, where there are changes, where if you're well informed, should not be anything more than that, just a stage. That WHO is scary. 70% of us have no information, regardless of our social class or cultural class or whatever. So I always joke, and I often talk to women who are from Harvard and Yale, and often when we talk about menopause as a single day, they have the women, what? When you talk about the symptoms, they always have the 46-year-old. He says, oh, so what I'm feeling is that? Well, the real truth is I can't guarantee it, but talk to your doctor about it. And the last sentence, which is the worst of all, no one ever talked to me about it. And here we have another thing. Please, don't start crying. There's more than 34 symptoms. No one has all of them. There are the 8 most common, which are cycle irregularities, which was when we begin to realize that something's happening. And if you are over 40 and you begin to have irregularities and your doctor says, oh, that's normal, it's stress, change your doctor. Because if I had done it, I would have been better off. The famous hot flushes, which we all relate to, menopause, insomnium, that's very important. One of the first symptoms we have is that our hormones begin to go up and down. And then our great friend, irritability, change in mood, anxiety. I always joke, and I say that we begin the TPM, which is constant premenopausal tension. And for us, the women at work and in leadership positions, all aspects that deal with mental gaps and lack of concentration, they have an enormous effect, because without information, it affects our self-esteem and eats it up because we don't know what's happening to us. Dryness, that's the most facial and vaginal dryness, but also our eyes, our nose, our ears. Often we are uncomfortable with the contact lenses. We go to 10 oculists and they give us drops. It would have been so much easier to tell us, look, in that stage, you may continue to use the contact lenses, but it's not going to change. This is normal because your estrogen is dropping. So this is going to happen. Changes in libido, all related to sexual sphere, and the increased weight. The increased weight is something that we talk about at least for 3 hours, because we're not talking about an increase in weight, which has to do with kilos. It's just a way in which the fat distributes. But there are a lot of less common and unexpected things like palpitations, loss of hair, eye dryness, patches of cold. Here I've been a bit of a nepotist. I put the symptoms I felt, and I had no idea they had anything to do with menopause. Palpitations, of course. I ended up with a cardiologist. I didn't know if it was excitement, if I was in love. And I said, look, I see a dog and I have palpitations, so it can't be love. These were things that I was feeling, and I wasn't really relating to this stage. And I come from a privileged situation where I could go to the doctor, where I had whom to talk to. Imagine, I'm pretty daring, as you can see. I was not ashamed to ask for help. Unfortunately, this is not what most women go through. So here we have to talk about something very important for you, those of you who are hearing us. And as of today, I want you to at least become more sensitive to this. There are several types of menopause. We're talking about a change which is hormonal. It has nothing to do with the age. Not always is menopause going to come at at a given age. I don't like the natural, but that's how it's known. It's the menopause, which happens in time, which usually is between 45 and 55 years of age. Most between 51, 52 years of age, more or less. And it often lasts, the climacteric lasts between 7 and 15 years, with perimenopause, which begins 4 to 10 years before the actual day of the menopause. But you can realize that here we're talking about something that happens to us when we're way younger than we think. So let's start changing. Menopause is not something that happens to old people. It happens to women in the boom of their life. We have the early menopause, which is when we stop menstruating naturally before the age of 45, which is quite confused with primary ovarian failure, which used to be called early menopause. Why the difference? Why don't we use the word menopause? When that woman stops menstruating before the age of 40, with the primary ovarian failure, I have doctors here who can correct me if I'm wrong, there is a very tiny percentage that can revert. Menopause has no reversion. If you're hearing me and you started your menopause, forget it. There's no way to change it. It happens. Menopause is menopause forever. Put that in your heads. And let's go out and recognize this new stage we're in. And yes, there's the late menopause, when often stop menstruating after the age of 55. Around 10% of us. And here we have one which I ask you to pay attention to. It could happen to your friends, to your colleagues, to your whatever. And that's when it's not natural. It is induced due to some type of surgery, when the ovarian are excised due to chemotherapy. The tamoxifen, for example, can induce early menopause. Those people need to be embraced and hugged. They're not only going through the very difficult time, but they're also suffering all the symptoms that they start feeling suddenly. So today you get operated, and tomorrow you start with the hot flashes, because that's pretty abrupt. And those people really need to count on our understanding and our help, which can often be silence and just a hug. And then the trans menopause, which is also very important, because the trans men, when they begin their menopausal process, or the androgenations have an induced menopause, if they decide not to use the androgen, because many, they don't seem to need it because they don't need the secondary traits, they're going to go through a natural menopause. But here the question is that it's taboo. So these people also need for us to be there for them. And we have about 0.8% of our community of trans men who bring a lot into this discussion, especially because most of them were never told about menopause. When doctors begin to give them androgens, they don't tell them that they're inducing this. So many believe that the hot flashes had to do with the testosterone, but no, it had to do with the menopause. In summary, it can last up to 15 years. It often begins before you think. It has an impact on most. It's a biological change that cannot be avoided. It's not a liability. It's not a problem. Most can go through it without any problems, as long as you have the information, the support, and the help. That is fundamental. And don't forget, it often begins before we believe. Yes, ladies, we look at ourselves in the mirror and often like what we see. But our ovaries have the real age. So the fact that we look young doesn't mean that we cannot be going into menopause. And it's important to know it, because we can ask for help. We can also be more informed when we go to the doctors. And now now that we're a little bit on the same page of what the stage is, that it's a menopause one day of our lives, that it's going to happen to all of us. And though each individual is unique, the impact at work is very similar. So I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Victoria.
Yes, you have the floor. It's important to talk about menopause in the labor environment of the bank. Yes, welcome everyone, especially a big welcome to those who are with us virtually. And it's important to talk about menopause because we've seen it as a taboo, as an enigma, and I want to encourage you to normalize something that's normal and natural. And instead of it being stigmatized or being seen as a taboo, it should be seen as another stage, another phase that is positive as well. And besides any kind of symptoms, emotional or physical symptoms, this is also a phase where women can rise to the top of their potential. They're in their prime, professionally speaking. They might be reaching a lot of their goals during this period of time. So we have to leave any prejudices and taboos about menopause behind. And even women do it. We women do it, and men do it as well. And that's why I think it's so good to have so many men with us today. Gender and age discrimination are a reality, and I think it's something that we need to pay attention to because it creates a lot of pressure, especially for professional women. And here we need to, again, take a closer look at this stage and look at it with more empathy and figure out how we can support women going through this. Catholic is a global organization. It does studies on women, and it talks about something called lookism. Look, it's that pressure that we feel to look younger, more attractive, and women are subjected to more of it, and not just women 40 and up, but younger women as well. It's a pressure that we women face to a greater extent than men do. So we need to bear that in mind. We're always feeling that pressure. Now, speaking about the Inter-American Development Banks more specifically, I could say that most of our staff is between or is actually over 40 years of age, actually, for that's true for men and women. And within that group, 67% are above 40 when talking about women. So 67% of our women are above 40 years old. And out of that group, 33% are women who are in senior positions. So all of this is important to realize because this is the time when women are perhaps exhibiting their highest potential. And when we look at our commitment survey, we conduct one every year at the bank, we see how committed our employees are feeling. And here we've seen that women, that group of over 40 women, have some of the highest percentages of commitment. So that's very interesting. These are the women who are the most committed, who have a high level of potential at every level. So it's a very interesting thing to note. And what are we doing to generate these spaces that our women need? Things like this conversation that we are having openly now. We had never had it. We were all surprised. I was so happy to be invited to be a part of the panel. And it's something we need to do, openly discuss it, educate ourselves, because often what happens is that we have no idea. So we don't know what it is. We don't know what the symptoms are. We feel surprised, and it shouldn't be that way. We should educate ourselves and support each other. And men and women support each other as well. So we are more aware, and we do create that environment of trust and openness, that psychological safety. And we talk about that in the bank, and we've invested in that idea that people should feel comfortable to discuss any topic. And here again, this psychological safety, this feeling of psychological safety is important. And in our commitment survey, we have included questions about psychological safety because we want to understand how our staff feels psychologically safe. So we want to make sure that we can create this space. It will not be a taboo, and that we can support our staff. Also, if there are any discriminatory behaviors, we want to deal with them immediately. We've started to have these conversations. There are some actions that we're taking to make sure this doesn't happen. For supervisors and leaders, what we've also done is to talk with them about how they can be more inclusive, how they can address these topics and be more empathetic and more inclusive again, because a lot of this has to do with empathy. Our colleague who's here in the audience talks about empathy a lot, and I think it is a topic that's important to highlight. We also have at the IDB policies that are meant to address flexible work systems. And we've had to adapt during the pandemic. And now we live in a hybrid system, and our supervisors need to know how to manage hybrid work, how to be more inclusive, communicate better with their staff, and how to take advantage of the talent, how to leverage the talent of these women in the best way possible, because sometimes we don't know how to do that. Sometimes we also have flexible work policies. So within our hybrid system, we also have flexible work and personal days. For up to 8 days, people can, a year, they can take these personal days. And we want to create an inclusive culture from the bottom up, from the top down. We can all talk about it and we all experience it. So that's what we're doing on this matter. Thank you very much, Victoria. This idea of psychological safety is very important, both for men and for women. I'm learning a lot about this, and it's important for all of us to know about this. And we all need to be involved, to listen, and to have empathy. That's the most important thing here. Andrea, thank you very much for being here. And Caridad, thank you to you as well for all that support from GDI. Tell us a little bit why this is important for the bank as well in terms of public policies in the region. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. And for all of you who have joined, thank you. This is something that we don't talk much about, and it is a development issue. 37 million women will be going through menopause in 2025, and this impacts us in different ways. In Latin America, this number will continue to grow because we are a rapidly aging population. We will be, together with Europe, one of the few regions in the world that will have such high percentages in this regard. There are some studies, unfortunately, they've done for developed countries. We don't have any for the region, but they have observed that the menopause symptoms, in particular the ones that Miriam was referring to, the more complex ones, many linked to psychological issues, do have an impact in women's lives. And this can mean that women may be absent for work. So the number of days they're absent increases. Many have to reduce the number of hours they work because they can't make those symptoms compatible with all the work they need to do, and still others choose to leave their jobs, and this has an impact on the economy, on employers, and on the women themselves. As we think about the cost for the economy, let's talk about absenteeism. This has a cost for businesses trying to replace a woman in her professional prime who has been committed to a company for many years, has a cost, and the cost of people leaving their jobs also. And if we focus on those women who leave their jobs, this has short-term and long-term costs. In the short term, these are women who lose their income or their job benefits, health insurance, paid vacation. And in the long term, they will see an impact in their contributions to their pension. So they will spend fewer years contributing to their retirement. And also during the reproductive age, when they have younger kids, many of them also interrupted their professional lives or worked fewer hours so they could take care of their children, those non-remunerated hours of care-related work. So when we take into account all these elements, we see a very powerful impact on their lives. And this means that looking to the future, many will need to depend on the income of their partners or on non-contributive pensions. Unfortunately, as I was saying, we don't have a lot of data in the region, but thanks to some studies we've conducted in the bank, we see that there is an alignment between the moment when women start leaving their jobs, starting at 50, and this is also linked to the need to take care of older parents, and this coincides with menopause. So there's a lack of information, we know that, but we do see that for all these elements seem to take place at the same time around the age of 50. So this is not exhaustive, but it's a list of some policies we might implement to help women along in this transition and to reduce the economic costs of the loss of these women from the labor market. First of all, as I was saying, we don't have data, and without data, we can't think about specific policies or adequate policies in order to support these people. So we need to begin to think of how we can collect that data through surveys, perhaps, that already exist. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can include questions in home surveys or health surveys or use of time surveys that are becoming so common in the region. A second policy that Victoria already mentioned is how the workplace rather, can be more inclusive. There are companies that specialize in helping employers be more supportive of their employees, female and even all employees above the age of 40, and they can propose specific policies. They can review the policies of the company and help train people in leadership positions so they can be more empathetic, understand the situation of their teams, and adapt the ways in which they work and offer their workers more flexibility. Also, communication campaigns within the organizations are useful. This way, the entire staff feels more confident about talking about this. Other policies that are less well known, as Victoria was saying, we're lucky at the IDB that we have a high level of labor flexibility. We have personal days and others, but that's not the case everywhere. Providing flexible time or giving women days when they don't have to provide an explanation of why they're taking the day off. They can go to the doctor, or if they woke up with a migraine that day, that's one of the symptoms of menopause. They don't have to go to work and nobody will demand any explanations. There are other countries that are a bit more advanced. Spain, for example, has now days off for menstruation. Make it broader, perhaps, and have it cover that transition to menopause. So small changes that can have a big impact on women. I'd like to point out something here. When thinking about development, these are policies that will benefit women who work for an employer in the formal job market. But that is not the situation of many women in the region. Many work informally in a flexible or independent way, and they don't have these benefits. So we also need to think about what it is that we can do through public policy to provide support for the most vulnerable women. I don't have the solutions, but thinking about it, I think we should begin to ask ourselves how we can make this mainstream, from Social Security, for example, coverage, medical coverage. The public medical coverage is now financing perhaps hormone treatments to help women. In public hospitals, is the staff trained to support these women? Probably not, because it's not the case in developed countries, so probably not in the region. But we can start to work on these policies, and the IDB can be a strategic partner for governments in this. And we can look at it and address it from many different perspectives. It's a matter of health, of employment, social security. So I think if we look at it from many different angles, we will be able to better support the women in our region. That's all very interesting. Thank you very much. This has been a fantastic discussion. I don't know, are there any questions that you'd like to ask our audience that is here in person or from our virtual audience? Don't be shy. Hi, thank you. I'm Lubin from the IDB Lab. You talked about intersectionality and the silver economy. And just yesterday, I was lucky enough to talk to Mira for a bit, and I heard that even in terms of programs and projects, this it can be inserted into the entire idea of the cycle of a woman's life as more than intersectionality with the silver economy. It can fill a gap of projects that we don't even have for the entire the cycle of a woman's life. I think that would be an interesting idea to think about. It's more a suggestion than a question. Yes, we always make the comment with Cesar and Victoria and with Andrea. I didn't have as much time to talk, but this climacteric economy, we are the gateway into that longevity of productivity. If we have informed climacteric and menopause, we know perhaps consumption of water has to change, those little things that make such a big difference. And in Nopausa, we offer workshops for more vulnerable women, and they truly appreciate that information because they can see the change in their daily lives. So we're talking about something that's very important. It's that moment where if you make intelligent decisions, then you can ensure that positive professional longevity in a much more pragmatic way. We know we're going to live longer today, so we need to understand that we will need to project into the future how we want to do it. You can't just say, oh, how lucky I am. My genes allowed me to get to the age of 83. If we want to reach that age in the best way, we'll need to make intelligent, informed decisions. So information is power. So menopause and climacteric are not another liability for our sex or for the idea of having positions of power or anything else. It's the other way around. We want to empower women so that they can continue to grow and develop, so that they have enough information to ask for help if they need it. And if those whole flashes are bothering her, then she should know that there are alternatives in help. So at No Pausa, we say the only thing that there's no solution for, and it's the worst symptom of menopause, is number 35, which is lack of information. For the rest of them, in one way or another, we can manage. That's why I want to thank the IDB Lab, because we need those discovery moments, these. How many of you had thought about menopause or climacteric? And we all know someone, our mothers, aunts, a colleague, partner. We all know someone. So that is walking the talk of inclusion for female talent after 40, because we don't talk about a hormonal biography only starting at the end of the story. There's the fertile period, pregnancy for those who want it, and then what? We die after that? We just fall off a cliff? What happens? What happened to her needs? How much does it cost to stop menstruating? What is the cost of climacteric and menopause? Let's put those topics on the agenda. Let's truly understand and value that female talent. Victoria, yes, I wanted to complement what Miriam was saying a bit and talk a little bit about some of the resources we have at the bank. If we want to fix the world, we have to start at our own house, in our own house, right? We always say that. So start at home. And that's why I wanted to talk about some of the things we're doing here at the IDB so we can ensure greater inclusion. We have our diversity program, and here we talk a lot about unconscious bias, and we provide training to help us understand it, and to talk about microaggressions that can happen. How can we adapt our language and make it more inclusive? Because we talk about men, supervisors, managers, and women. And we have some simulations also that we've put together using artificial intelligence and avatars. And what we see are scenarios where people can practice these perhaps uncomfortable conversations. We also have the emotional versatility program, which we created during the pandemic, and it was created with the idea that our employees confidentially would have a place, a few sessions to talk about those emotional matters and physical symptoms perhaps that they are growing through. Also, we supervisors are providing all of our support for this. So as an example of how to provide this space for people when they need it and how to generate more trust and confidence. We also have our resource groups, the ERGs as we call them. They also deal with more specific areas in terms of how to support women, LGBTQ, disability, and we also have a race category there as well. So this is very important. And for women, the IDB has invested much into women's development. We are now in the 12th edition of our Emerging Women Leaders program, where we talk about how women can be more confident, how to position themselves better, make themselves more visible. And we talk a lot about menopause because we have about 300 graduates, and many of them are 40 and over years of age, and they continue to shine and to grow. So these are some of the programs we have to provide that kind of support. And there's one that I'm very passionate about, and that's our gym. When we talk about well-being at the bank, we talk about physical, mental, and emotional well-being. It's a holistic definition, and many of my colleagues know that I have a passion for exercise, so we've just enlarged our gym. And when I went through menopause, what really helped me was exercise, so I promote that strategy a lot because it's very helpful. And finally, we have our health center, and that's significant as well. People can make medical appointments, talk to a doctor, to a nurse. We have the EAP program. It's an employee assistance program where you can have up to 6 free confidential sessions for the employee and their family, where they can talk about any topic they want. They can be the topic we're discussing today or any other topic. And finally, we have the website that we've built, the well-being website, which provides all kinds of resources, and we continue to work on it and promote it, and we'll be happy to send you the link if you'd like to take a look at it. And we have many articles there about menopause already, suggestions as well. So it's also important to be aware of that, because a lot of the investment we've made because precisely we feel this is such an important aspect of taking good care of an employees. Thank you very much, Victoria. Yes, I just wanted to add some thoughts. Thank you very much to all of you for bringing this topic to the table. It's so important to all of us, women, men, binary, non-binary people. I don't want to exclude anybody. And the thought I wanted to share and to complement what Victoria was saying was regarding the development of leadership skills for women, for men, for everyone. How do we include this topic, which is a health topic, and it's a matter of empathy as well, to help us better understand not just women, but there are also men who come to work perhaps, and their partner, their spouse is going through perimenopause or menopause, and they don't understand what's going on, and they come to work, they're at a loss. Menopause is not happening to them, but they are experiencing it through their partner or some other family member. So it's something that we all might be affected by. And let's not just say things so lightly. Hysterical, that's a word that we've used before. It comes from hyster, the word for uterus, and we would just brush it aside, but that's not what we do today anymore. Thank you very much. Are there any questions online? Apparently not. I was very interested in the word climaterium. I read a book about transitions, and it said that life is about transitions. And when we talk about climacteric, we understand, even as men, the importance of living through these transitions as a full part of our life and connecting them to everything we do in our work, in our personal lives, so we can grow as people, how we can be more empathetic, and so we can have these conversations in a more normalized and open way. So thank you very much for being us. And now we invite you to some snacks, some post-event snacks together with us. Thank you very much. All of you who are here and all of you who are with us online. There's one thing I really wanted to say before we close. We need a change of paradigm. We cannot continue to look at over 45 people as having the decline that we used to think they had. We need a change of paradigm. And to have that change of paradigm, we still need to have discussions like the one we're having today. We think we have overcome our biases, but we need to continue to work on them. I want to thank the IDB and the IDB Lab on behalf of No Pausa. Let's continue working on this, making it more visible. Let's continue to normalize these discussions. Thank you very much.